In the heart of the Great Lakes, something moves swiftly, deep underwater near the Mackinac Bridge. You can't see it or hear it, even as it moves south, straight down the middle of the state.
Do you think people realize how close it is to our everyday lives?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think if they don't see it, they don't think about it.
Every single day, 22 million gallons of crude oil speeds right through the heart of Michigan, through Line 5, an underground and underwater pipeline, 645 miles long. Some call it a ticking time bomb.
What's your response to the folks who say, listen, there's been some 33 leaks since back in the 50s?
This pipeline, never supposed to run past some 45 years, has now been in operation for 70 years.
Local 4 investigates. We'll show you the unseen path of this very controversial pipeline.
I don't think anyone has any idea there is a 30-inch pipeline right here, right next to that rest stop, all along I-75. Right here in Indian River. The pipeline goes through that neighborhood back there, then underneath this marina.
We're talking to folks up north.
If something happens?
And in Metro Detroit, where some of the oil ends up.
It ain't right. Don't know what the words to say, but it ain't right.
This story affects everybody.
I couldn't find a worse place in the Great Lakes to have an oil spill.
When another pipeline owned by the same company spilled more than 1 million gallons of oil in the Kalamazoo River,
I did not know about the oil pipeline.
this woman was forced to leave her home.
Problem was, it wasn't our choice to move.
So could another spill happen again?
We get an alert.
We're showing you how Line 5 is monitored.
Hi.
Talking to families who live along the pipeline.
How often do you go inside the pipe?
And showing you what could be next.
One of the biggest assets we have in this state of Michigan is the fresh water from the Great Lakes.
700 miles of shoreline are at risk if Line 5 ruptures.
Yes, they should be concerned.
So here's the deal. We decided to take a close look, a really close look at Line 5, what it is, why are so many people complaining about it, and why do people support it? Now, if you don't know, it's a pipeline that carries crude oil through the Mackinac Straits. And it's getting a whole lot of attention. But I have to say, when I would ask people about what do you think about Line 5, a lot of Metro Detroiters were like, isn't that a up north story, or doesn't that have to deal with the Mackinac Bridge? Actually, it is so much more, and we all really need to care about this because this pipeline actually goes through the entire state. I mean, if something went wrong, it would affect our Great Lakes, our water, our economy, the places we vacation. So, in the next half hour, I'm going to take you to some pretty cool places, meet some interesting folks, take you behind the scenes. I wind up in a cornfield, a marina. I even show up at a pre-wedding party. Uninvited, but it goes okay. So first, let's start with, so you get it, what is Line 5?
At this moment, millions of gallons of oil move around the country unseen, through pipelines, under farms, rivers, and cities. You could be sitting over a pipeline right now. Pipelines were built as a safe way to move hazardous liquids, instead of by train or truck or ship. So oil pipelines are nothing new. But one 70-year-old section of pipeline makes people really nervous. Line 5, a 645-mile-long stretch of pipeline that starts and ends in Canada. Starting in Superior, Wisconsin, Line 5 then moves east across Wisconsin and Michigan's Upper Peninsula. At the Mackinac Bridge, Line 5 turns south, going under the Straits of Mackinac, and then continuing south down the middle of the state. Then, at about Bay City, Line 5 turns east again, cutting across the Thumb and then under the St. Clair River, ending back in Canada, in Sarnia, Ontario. Canadian company Enbridge, Inc. owns Line 5. The pipeline delivers 22 million gallons of oil and natural gas liquids every single day. Some of it is sent to the Marathon Oil Refinery in Detroit and refineries in Toledo and Pennsylvania. Enbridge says Line 5 supplies more than 50% of Michigan's propane. But this section of Line 5, a 4.5-mile stretch across the Straits of Mackinac, has really sparked some anger, lawsuits, and some serious concerns about our Great Lakes. Experts say if Line 5 were to rupture here, the effect on Michigan's economy and environment could be catastrophic. Marshall, Michigan. It's a small town with a big story, a story that turned residents' lives upside down.
Did you ever think that you would leave?
No, the house was being renovated to live there forever.
We met Jane Ann Montague recently back in Marshall
I raised my children there. I lived there for 35 or 36 years.
to talk about what happened back in July of 2010.
And I got here and you could smell it. And then I walked over and the creek was black.
It was one of the biggest inland oil spills in U.S. history.
I knew it couldn't be good. And then there was anger.
Enbridge's Line 6B ruptured in a wetland near Marshall, sending more than 840,000 gallons of crude oil just spewing into the Talmadge Creek and nearly 40 miles down the Kalamazoo River.
Our main concern is we're all on wells, and what's it going to do to our water supply?
Many didn't realize how close the pipeline was to their homes.
Frankly, I didn't even know there were pipelines in the area.
When the line broke, the sludge gradually sank to the bottom. About 150 families moved away permanently, including Montague.
But to be brutally honest, we were a little upset with the focus on the wildlife and the disregard for us as homeowners.
These are some of the photos she took during the cleanup. She says she felt life would never be the same there, so she had to move her family out of Marshall.
The problem was it wasn't our choice to move. That was the problem. It was not our choice.
After the spill, federal investigators concluded Enbridge did not properly maintain the 41-year-old pipeline.
The very first moment I stepped near the river, I saw muskrat desperately trying to clean itself of oil, going back in and out of the oiled river.
That's Beth Wallace. She's with the National Wildlife Federation in Ann Arbor. She saw firsthand the effects of the spill.
We smelled it several miles away, the toxic tar aroma that just overtook all of the communities that were affected was overwhelming in itself. I mean, it made you dizzy, it hurt to breathe.
As she experienced the catastrophe in Marshall unfold, she realized pipeline safety really needs to be addressed.
Ensuring these disasters never happen again, as well as holding corporations accountable for when releases happen.
So she started doing research and then couldn't believe what she found. That's when she learned about Line 5, a pipeline 20 years older than the ruptured Line 6B, and its location right under the Straits of Mackinac.
Line 5 became so much more alarming when we learned for 4 miles that pipeline is exposed and open for 4 miles in the Straits of Mackinac in Lake Michigan and Huron, and poses a massive spill risk. It could be up to 700 miles of shoreline that would be affected from a spill. It would be billions of people potentially losing their homes and their livelihood and having to leave. It would be thousands of businesses leaving the area forever, not to mention the wildlife that would potentially never recover.
Okay, so how safe is Line 5? That brings us here.
That this red line here is right pipeline,
Right.
which I didn't realize it was that close to the interstate.
We're in my driveway in Oakland County. We're mapping out our plan.
Sounds like 90 miles. Does that make sense?
We're tracking down the route of Line 5 throughout the state. Now, it's one thing to see it on a map, but another to see firsthand the communities it runs through.
I don't know what we're going to see.
All right.
We'll find out.
All right. Let's
So
go.
We are driving up I-75, headed up north.
Are you going to shoot out the right out?
Yeah, I'm going to shoot out the right.
You don't have to get far to realize you're actually driving right next to a 645-mile oil pipeline.
So if you vacation up north, odds are you probably have stopped here. This is the Linwood Rest Stop. What most people don't realize, Line 5 actually runs almost right underneath this spot. If you go over there, you can see the marker. I want to show you. All right, here's the sign. It says Enbridge, warning, petroleum pipeline. It took like less than 2 minutes to walk from the parking lot. I seriously don't think anybody knows that this pipeline is running this whole stretch right by I-75 where we travel back and forth all the time up north. So we're doing a story about Line 5. Have you heard about Line 5?
Sure.
At the rest stop, we ran into Julie and Mark Teicher. They're from West Bloomfield.
Did you know how close it is to this rest stop?
No.
Do you think people realize how close it is to our everyday lives?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think if they don't see it, they don't think about it.
Well, because I think our agriculture, especially in Michigan these days, is so fragile that if people realized that oil pipelines were so close to agriculture that's used for food and cattle and whatever, that they would care more about transporting or how it's transported.
Now remember, Line 5 stretches from the UP through the state and ends in Sarnia, hitting some places in between most would never imagine.
Most people don't realize how Line 5 travels throughout the state. So right now we're in Standish in the middle of a cornfield. Take a look, you can see the marker Enbridge put there. It says warning, petroleum pipeline. So Line 5 goes underneath this cornfield, up this hill, across this road, and downstate.
We spotted this house right next to the cornfield and the pipeline. We had to find out what these homeowners thought about their safety, their land. Did they have any concerns?
We're doing a story about Line 5, and I'm assuming you're aware of it because the pipeline's right there. We literally just drove up and shot the cornfield, and I was like, this house is right next to it. So I was just wondering, like if that's on your radar, is that of concern?
No, I just don't think about it. It's been there so long, it's just I don't think about it.
Like I see the markers and it says like warning petroleum pipeline and it goes through the corn and all the way over there.
Yeah, nope, not a concern.
Bring us the oil.
Oh, bring us the oil.
That's my theory.
She says bring us the oil, but at what risk?
What's important to realize is the Great Lakes make up 20% of the world's fresh water, and two of those Great Lakes, Michigan and Huron, meet behind me there at the Straits of Mackinac, the same place where Line 5 runs through.
I couldn't find a worse place in the Great Lakes to have an oil spill in terms of how far, how fast, and how unpredictably it would spread.
That's Dr. David Schwab, a retired scientist from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also a retired faculty member from the University of Michigan.
I'm an oceanographer who works on the Great Lakes, and I started using these models that we had developed for predicting currents in the Great Lakes to predict what would happen if there was an oil spill from Line 5 in the Straits. The Straits are a unique place where the currents between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron can be flowing in either direction at any given time. Water can be going from Lake Huron into Lake Michigan or Lake Michigan into Lake Huron. And it changes direction every 2 or 3 days, depending on what the weather's been for the last 2 or 3 days.
Dr. Schwab says because of the unpredictability of the currents and the amount of shoreline that could be impacted, it makes the Straits a very dangerous place for an oil spill, something everyone in Michigan should care about.
The people in the Detroit area are citizens of Michigan, and one of the biggest assets we have in this state of Michigan is the fresh water from the Great Lakes. They should be concerned.
Our drive up north to follow Line 5 continues.
Another area Line 5 goes through right here in Indian River. The pipeline goes through that neighborhood back there, then underneath this marina and then under the river, carrying some 540,000 barrels of oil every day.
It's important to remember, Michigan tourism is huge. Just last year, some $48 billion in tourism dollars were spent in the state, including dollars spent by those who live in Metro Detroit and love going up north.
I'm from a TV station doing a story about Line 5.
We caught up with some Metro Detroiters vacationing in this Indian River neighborhood. We spotted a Line 5 marker right next to the backyard. Now you have to think they have an opinion on that. They were having a wedding rehearsal party, but didn't mind us stopping in.
Goes across the river.
That's what I thought.
The other one over there?
Okay, we wanted to see if we could get a shot of that with our camera. Are you feel good? It's all, you no worries?
They are on top of it.
The homeowner recalls when a neighbor started digging in her yard and Enbridge showed up.
They came out and said, put the shovel away, you can't dig by there.
They're constantly checking.
They check it out.
Okay. Sorry for interrupting your party. So they're not worried about the pipeline or any possible rupture. They feel safe. Oh, but there is worry.
A lot of the tribes within the state of Michigan came here for the fact that you have the largest bodies of fresh water, not only for transportation, commerce, but for sustainability.
Jamie Stuck is the president of the United Tribes of Michigan.
My grandfather was born and raised on Pine Creek Reservation.
Line 5 worries him. Stuck knows all too well about oil spills. He lived through the 2010 Enbridge oil spill in Marshall.
The Kalamazoo River is our Aboriginal territory for harvesting wild rice, fishing, hunting, transportation. A lot of our neighbors were impacted. Like you said, a lot of people had to leave just because of the smell and because of the contamination of their riverfront. Something that's going to take generations to get back to normal.
Now, because of what he experienced with the Marshall spill and how Enbridge responded, he wants Line 5 decommissioned or shut down.
We sent a letter to President Biden asking him to support Governor Whitmer's decision to decommission Line 5.
President Joe Biden has not taken any official stance on Line 5. As you can imagine, this could turn into a hot topic as we approach the presidential election.
Michigan ought to have the ability to decide where pipelines run in our state.
Michigan attorney Dana Nessel is a vocal critic of Enbridge and how it does business.
This is a company that does not have a great track record.
She's worried what happened in Marshall back in 2010 could happen with Line 5 in the Mackinac Straits.
This pipeline, again, never supposed to run past some 45 years, has now been in operation for 70 years.
The Attorney General wants to see Line 5 shut down. Enbridge says not so fast. The company says it supplies 65% of the propane demand in the Upper Peninsula. To keep the oil flowing through Line 5, Enbridge has a solution. Build a protective tunnel under the Straits of Mackinac to enclose the pipe. But there's a legal fight between the state of Michigan and Enbridge. Back in 2020, the state filed a legal order to shut down Line 5. Enbridge refused. The case moved from state court to U.S. federal court. Enbridge arguing this is a federal issue.
We maintain that these cases belong in state court. This is a matter for the state of Michigan.
Do you understand why they're fighting this?
Well, we understand the concerns, and as far as protecting the waters, protecting the straits and the Great Lakes, that's something we very much feel strongly about and believe in.
That's Ryan Duffy, an Enbridge spokesperson. I asked him about the leaks that have occurred on Line 5 for decades.
When you take a look at it, that has to be of some concern that it's happened 33 times.
Well, I think it's important to have some perspective with those numbers. That is 70 years we've been operating the pipeline, 22 million gallons a day going through the pipeline. And if you
so every other year you would have a leak if you're going to do the numbers.
Well, when you look at those numbers and break them down, more than half, the majority, actually took place on Enbridge property, so that's our facility. And then you need to look at the last 20 years, there have been 5 releases of product on the line.
Is 5 okay?
No amount is okay. So 5 releases in the last 20 years where those amounts were cleaned up and the area was cleaned in accordance to all the rules and regulations that go along with that. So when you look at it, as technology improves, the numbers go way down.
You have to understand there's a little bit of erosion of trust there and worry.
We do. Trust is something that is earned every day. So every day we work to rebuild that trust. I can tell you.
Has it been rebuilt? Well, has the company done enough?
That's not for me to determine, but it is something we work on every day. And what happened in Marshall was the lowest point for us as a company ever. In our history, it completely transformed how we do things.
We'll just talk about the stuff.
And that brings us here to the Enbridge Straits Maritime Operations Center. Enbridge built this $50 million facility after the Marshall spill. They wanted new technology to keep a close watch over Line 5.
An Enbridge operation, but we contract out MPC to stand out watch.
MPC?
So is Marine Pollution Control out of Detroit.
Cameras have not been allowed inside until now.
All these are
Radar targets. All these little white circles are radar targets that our radar is picking up, either vessel activities.
It's here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Enbridge monitors the boat traffic that travels through the straits and over Line 5.
So there are 7 cameras strategically placed around the straits to monitor these vessels going over the pipeline, and they can see pretty far, anywhere from 11 to 17 miles. Take a look on this morning. This is White Shoal Lighthouse, 17 miles away.
So this big solid red line is the Mackinac Bridge,
Okay.
and this is the pipeline. So every time a vessel comes into the straits, we get an alert. Our watchstander acknowledges it, and then we start tracking it until it crosses the pipeline and it exits out the other side.
Burns Harbor, Burns Harbor, Burns Harbor. This is Enbridge Straits Maritime Operations Center, over.
The issue, anchor strikes. They've happened before and hit the pipeline.
With the anchor incident you're talking about several years ago, the pipeline was struck. You know, there was no damage to the steel. The pipeline did what it was supposed to do, and it withstood that, and it kept operating, and we were able to repair the coating, and there was never any release of product.
Let's talk about what's next. There's a plan. What is the plan, and why is this a better plan?
So the Great Lakes Tunnel Project? Well, we really believe that is the solution. That's because it enhances safety at the straits, because the pipeline will be in the tunnel deep below the lake bed. You eliminate the chance you're ever going to have any kind of anchor strike, and you virtually eliminate the chance you're ever going to have any kind of product get out into the water.
It's a Canadian company coming into Michigan. You've got the governor, you've got the attorney general fighting this. How does that make you feel as a company that, from that perspective, you're not wanted?
Well, so, you know, we would pay the entire cost of the tunnel, then we would turn it over to the state, and they'd have ownership of it and could benefit from it.
So this is the west leg coming in.
To better understand the pipeline, we came here to one of the 16 pumping stations for Line 5. This is the Mackinac City Pump Station, where the pressure of the pipe is controlled through the straits.
So that's literally Line 5?
This is literally Line 5.
Joe Calcaterra is an Enbridge pipeline maintenance supervisor.
What does the pumping station do?
Well, it increases the pressure. So again, the brilliance in the engineering of the Straits crossing. There's no pump station at North Straits. It's just a valve yard. It goes from a 30-inch to 220s. So you're at your lowest pressure through the straits. Then this will have, it's a suction, it's suction into the pump, and then it pumps it out. On the back side of the pump, you're probably over 300 PSI.
Okay.
So then that'll kick it to the next station.
Calcaterra says new technology added to Line 5 helps detect anchor strikes to the pipe.
If you hit it, it'll register. So during that anchor strike at 2018, we had them on here. There's one here, one on that side. It wasn't commissioned yet, so we had them scrub the data, and they were able to hear the event of the anchor.
So if an anchor would hit Line 5, it would make this sound that would record, and you would know you're in trouble.
And then you could get the location.
Inspection of the pipeline's critical. One way they check its integrity is by putting detection devices inside the pipe and letting it travel through.
So it goes inside the pipe and it inspects it in a sense.
It inspects it, and it's very, very accurate. You can get GPS locations of maybe it's a rock up against the side of the wall. So we'll do what's called an integrity dig and go address that.
How often do you go inside the pipe?
On average, main line, it's usually 3 to 5 years they'll run their tools, is the requirement. But here, right at the straits, it is annually. So it is probably the most inspected piece of pipe in the United States.
A 645-mile stretch of pipe being watched so closely. Now remember, this is just not an up north story. It's a story that affects all of us in Michigan. Some of the Line 5 oil is delivered here to this Marathon refinery in Detroit.
I'm about to be 60 years old. I've been here all my life.
Neil Thomas may not live next to Line 5, but he sure has an opinion about it.
Shut it down. Shut it down. It ain't right. You know, it just ain't right.
So many different voices.
A terrible spot of potential disaster.
And you could see the, oil residue on the plants. It was bad.
Different opinions.
I think it's important that they improve it.
Crude oil, how do you fully clean that up?
We have a really aggressive plan in Michigan to move towards green energy.
The Great Lakes are held in public trust. It's a life-sustaining resource that we must maintain.
But it's clear the need for a conversation as well as decisions on what's next is vitally important to protect our state, our economy, our natural resources, our way of life.